In this video, let me show you how to create a simple image editor using CSS. So this is how our image editor will look like. There are different options to edit this image. You can change the blur effect like this. You can add more blur effect if you want. Then you can have invert effect like this. The image will change. I'm refreshing each time to see the difference clearly. You can have multiple effects at the same time. Now you can have GrayScale. These are common visual effects, right? Then Sepia. Opacity also can be changed. Also contrast can be changed. So we can have these different visual effects to an image using our image editor, which we are going to develop mainly using CSS, and we will implement the logic using jQuery. So let's see how to develop an image editor like this using CSS. To illustrate this, I have already saved a web page, changed the title to image editor, and also added the reference to latest jQuery file online. Now we need to have the section to add an image and also the controls, that is Sepia, GrayScale, invert, etc. So let me add a div element with ID box where we will have both the sections. That is a section for the image and also the section for the controls. Okay, so I have added the div element. Next, let me add another div element within which we are going to add the image. So let me give the ID as image section. And let me add an image, and I have already saved an image in the same folder where this image editor.html file lies. So image src equals c image.jpg. This is the image I have saved in the same folder, and let me add an ID like image to edit. This is the ID I am giving, and also the source I have specified. Now we have the div element with the image, that is the image section div element contains our image. Next, let me have another section, that is div with ID controls section. That is where we are going to add different controls. Actually, in the image editor, we have 6 controls. The CSS filter property allows to add different controls like grayscale, invert, then blur. There are a number of visual properties that we can add as part of filter property in CSS. So I am selecting 6 of them. To add all those controls, I am having a div element with ID control section within which we are going to add the controls. Okay, and we are going to use range element. Range element is an input element where we can choose the range from the specified values. If we specify 0 to 100, we can select a value between 0 and 100, including those 2 values. So we are going to use the input element range to work as a control, and let us add these range input elements as li elements, that is list item elements, and we will style the list items in order to change the look and feel of the control elements or the range elements. So let me have first li element, that is the blur control, and I want to display this text on the top of the input range element. So what we can do here, I can add a br element, that is to display the item on the next line, and let me specify input type equal to range, id equal to blur, and I also need to specify the minimum value, maximum value, and also the current value to be selected. So let the min be 0, max be 10, and the current value, that is value, to be 0 itself. So this is the very first control, that is we are going to add the blur effect to the image, and we are using a range element with minimum value as 0, maximum as 10, and value, current value as 0. Like this, we need to add the required controls or the required filters we are going to add to the CSS filter property. I am adding these filter properties in the alphabetical order. So I have first added blur, then let me have contrast. Okay, so again li contrast. Let me copy this, that is better I think. Let me copy this, paste it here, change blur to contrast. Here also ID to contrast, And here let me set the minimum to 0 and maximum to 200 and the current value to 100. The range is different for different effects. For blur effect, it will be, so I have specified minimum to 0, maximum to 10 and the current value to 0. In case of contrast effect, the default value needs to be 100. So I have specified minimum to 0, maximum to 200 and the current value to 100. Next, let me again copy this. I am going to add 6 effects. We can choose whatever effects or whatever number of effects we want. Let me paste it and let this time the property be or the effect be GrayScale. So let me specify GrayScale here. ID also to GrayScale. If you do not know the default value to be set for these properties, you can get it online. For GrayScale, the default value needs to be 0. And I'm specifying minimum to 0 and maximum to 100. So we have now 3 properties. Next, let me paste it once again. And next effect I want to add is invert. So here invert itself, that is the ID. And for invert, the default value is to be 0. So I'm specifying 0 to be minimum and maximum to be 100. Okay, here I have added 2 zeros. Okay, next, again let me paste it. Let me change this to opacity. These are actually effects we can add as part of CSS filter. We cannot add the value we want. It should be possible with CSS filter. So here the default value of opacity is 100 itself. So that I am specifying minimum to 0 and maximum to 100. So now we have added 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Let me add one more. Let it be Sepia. And for that as well, the minimum 0, maximum 100 and default to be 0. That is the current value to be 0. Now we have added the required elements. Now let me save this and show you how our web page now looks like. See, this is our web page. Now it is looking like this. The image is here and the added effects are blur, contrast, grayscale, invert, opacity and sepia, and it is getting displayed like this. So we don't want to have these bullet points, right? So we need to style these elements a bit so that they will appear as we want. So let me first add the style section. In the head section, let me add style tag to add the CSS effects. Okay, and here first let me access the box element and align it to the center, and also let me specify margin to be 20px auto. Okay, now let me refresh. See, it is centered. Next, let me access the control section. Let me check the ID. It is control section itself. So specify control section, and the width of the image is actually 500px. So I'm setting the width for this section also as 500px, and let me specify the background color to be gray. Okay, and margin to be 0px auto. Now let me save this. Let me refresh. See, we have added gray background to the control section, set the width as same as that of the image, and by specifying margin 0px auto, it came just below the image. Next, I don't want to have these bullet points, and I also want to have these items display one next to the other, not one below the other. So what I can do for that? Let me access the li elements in the control section. So space li. And first, let me specify list style type to be none so that bullet points will be removed. Okay. And let me specify the display type to be inline block for the list items. Now let me save this and see the change. See, now they are being displayed like this. I want to have a margin between this border and these elements. So let me specify a margin of 15px. Let me save this. Let me refresh. See, a margin is added. Then I want to increase the size of this text. So what I can do, I can specify the font size to be say 20px, and also I want to change the text color. So let me change it to white. Now let me save this. Let me refresh. See, it is size is increased. If we want, we can increase to say 22 or 23, and let me refresh. See, it is getting displayed like this. So for blur, invert, grayscale and sepia, we have specified the value to be 0. We can check it here. Except for contrast and opacity, blur, the value is 0. Then for grayscale, value is 0. For invert, value is 0. And for sepia, value is 0. Then for opacity, value is 100. And for contrast also, value is 100. That's why we are seeing for contrast, value is 100. And for opacity, value is 100. And for contrast, I think the maximum is 200. That is why it is displayed at the center. So we have added the required elements and styled them as we want. Next, we need to implement the logic. That is, we want to add the selected value as a value of CSS filter property. So how we can do that? We can do it using jQuery or plain JavaScript. Here we are using jQuery.